Hey guys, welcome back. So now with getting back into our talks on the Immortal Hulk, to where with this one, we're just talking about issue 49, but with what Al Ewing and Joe Bennett have pulled off here. And I mean, along with Alex Ross, who's just been flexing on these covers. Like, I just imagine other artists seeing his work and just flipping their desk over. Because he's that great, and he's been that great for years. But what I love about the Immortal Hulk series, and I'll just say it now before it's even over, but what I love about it is like, this is one of those series that you can just point to whenever somebody gives you that dumb argument of powerful characters being too boring. Because if anyone comes at you with that, start here and just blast that nonsense into oblivion. But with us jumping back in, we gotta talk about Joe Fixit's response to seeing himself as this better person and what he does about it. So let's break this down. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so when we jump back in, we pick up off the heels of Joe Fixit really just coming to this place to where he's grown tired of being the person he's always been. Which prior to this point, it's had its good and its bad, but much like the usual case of self-reflection, what Joe notices for the most part is the bad. Because with Joe Fixit being the figure-it-out persona of Bruce Banner, for the longest time, Joe, he's only used that as being a muscle for hire and handling business for others, whether in Vegas or Madripoor, or just outright for himself, if nothing else. But with doing so, he's exercised some very harsh or even grimy forms of execution. But after his recent talk with Betty, where he first tells her that he left Banner in the below place, but then he opens up and expresses that for some time now he also feels like he's becoming a better person because of his growing optimism and his more positive perspective on different people and things. But she doesn't buy it because at the end of the day, you're not who you feel like you are or who you think you are, but instead it's what you do that defines your identity, not your feelings, or for that matter, even just the things you say. But when this happened and Betty had just left, like it's here where we're shown how deeply this hit Joe. Because in issue 48, when he told Jennifer and Jackie that he was going to get Bruce, like from then he hasn't uttered another word since. And with that happening throughout the course of issue 49, it's from here where the narration of Jackie McGee it takes over. And with the way that Al Ewing sets this up, man, it really feels like a slow motion montage with issue 49 that just ushers us into that final issue with us following Joe Fixit, but from the perspective of Jackie, who's watching all of this take place from a very epic first-hand perspective. But with her leaving with Joe and Jennifer, and in the case of Joe who hasn't said a word yet, it's here where we find Jackie thinking about the Fantastic Four. And with her thinking of the Fantastic Four, she more or less draws this comparison to their origin and the Hulk's origin, to where in the case of the Fantastic Four, she very much describes it as a fairy tale, with the four of them jumping on a rocket into the unknown, and when they came back changed, they were avatars of scientific progress, an example of courage against the odds, and a family unit who at its core, they were a reflection of how America would like to see itself. But as different as their journey was heading above, the Hulk's journey draws a stark contrast heading below, because this scientist wasn't seeking exploration. He built a bomb, and this scientist, unlike your fairy tale scientist, quote unquote, this scientist was someone who would not only later keep secrets from his wife, but he's also someone who, prior to the Gamma incident, who had killed his own father. And it's like when you hear it just one-to-one and stripped down without all the details, your second scientist very much fits the description of a monster. But then it's here where we see Joe, Jackie, and Jennifer making their way over to the Fantastic Four, to whom at this time their building is going under some reconstruction, which has more or less been the situation for quite some time. And more recently we've also gotten the update within the King in Black tie-in. But with the three of them heading here, this was a suggestion that was made by Jennifer, since like we'd seen, she'd been in contact with Ben Grimm, letting him know the updates on the Immortal Hulk, to where at this point she filled in Ben about Joe wanting to save Bruce from another dimension. In a response, Ben told Jennifer that he may have a way to help. And after hearing Ben's response, Jennifer told Joe, he just nodded, and from there the three of them just made their way. But with them heading here and making their way inside, like for one, this is one of our first looks at the newly constructed interior that Jackie describes as built back better than new. And she kind of just goes on to say like that's kind of what superheroes do, like when their headquarters is destroyed or just completely smashed by the bad guys, they just build back a better one. But with seeing this and hearing this, I can't help but think that this building is also a metaphor for what we're seeing with the Hulk collectively, with his identities being broken down and built back up again, so to speak. Like, I really sense that underlining vibe here. Could be a thing, could not, who knows. Because also, in a way, you can make a similar case for the story or the journey of Jackie as well. But also, as they make their way in, Jackie, she describes the new design almost like the new building is a church, and the three of them are making their way in to pray for the aid that they're in hope to receive from the people of this sanctuary, if you will. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but the comparison is super deep, because also when Jackie just describes the expressions of Jennifer coming back here, she says that Jennifer is kind of hard to read, like she can't tell if she's relieved or sad. But if I had to make a guess, Jennifer, she feels like a backslider right now. Like she ain't been to church in weeks, and she wants to go back, but she knows she left on some bad terms. And with the way that Jackie describes Joe, he's like that person that walks into a church and everybody looks at him and judges him like he's not supposed to be here. And it's a really accurate comparison, because when Joe gets here, the Avengers are staring him down and they're very much judging him off of his past, while at the same time, these are your superheroes. But also I want to point out, like with this happening, we're still seeing very much the same effect of the anger flowing out of Joe and it influencing the heroes. So it's not like they're completely just feeling this rage or this urge to combat him completely of themselves. But the funny thing is, like when Joe walks in, he still says nothing. But when he walks in, he just looks at him and smirks. And as soon as he does that, everybody in the room just goes off. One speaking over the other, and of course Steve Rogers trying to calm them down. But as Jackie would describe it, with everyone trying to make their point at the same time, and Thor trying to make a speech, but with all this chaos, nobody's words are coming through clear or even being heard over the other person. But as a result of Joe just smiling through the whole thing, this soon after then escalated into an all-out brawl again. And it happened so quick that Jackie, she doesn't even know who threw the first punch. All she knows that Jennifer jumped in front of her to protect her, while at the same time Jennifer's trying to tell everyone here to calm down because they're putting Jackie in danger. But once again, no one's being heard, and this fight or this brawl, it just continues. And from Jackie's perspective, she thinks of the Hulk's fight as something that never really ended. And like, sure, it may have its downtimes, but in a lot of ways it's something that's always continued. And maybe that'll change and maybe it won't, but as his story has gone so far, it's always been there. Even going back to before the Gamma Bomb, on the night of the anniversary of Bruce's mother's death, when Bruce murdered his father, which is also a story that was brilliantly revisited in Immortal Hulk issue 0, to where it recapped Brian Banner getting Bruce to lie about his mother's death in court, but eventually the truth came out and Brian was arrested, only to then plead insanity, to where instead of going to prison, he was treated and then released into Bruce's care, almost like Brian had gotten away with murder. But then on the flip side, after Brian's death at Rebecca's grave, you then have the case to where all the evidence clearly pointed at Bruce, with the additional footprints in the mud matching Bruce's shoe size, as well as a plastic star that was found at the scene, which could also be found in a number of Bruce's baby pictures. But all of this evidence was overlooked by the Dayton police, who knew both Rebecca and her brother-in-law, Sheriff Morris Walters, which then practically allowed Bruce to get away with murder. But Jackie goes on to describe that sometimes it works out like this, and sometimes it just doesn't work out at all, because sometimes factors will step in and the fight will play into Bruce's favor, and other times the fight is just completely unfair. But in either case, these are the fights that the Hulk, that he's been enduring his whole life. And with thinking of this and fast forwarding to now, to where Jackie sees all the Avengers blasting and hammering the Hulk with everything they got, to where all you can hear is flesh tearing and bones breaking, but then also reforming as quickly as they're coming apart. But it's here when Jackie describes that even with all this happening, that he never fell, because there's something in him that just wouldn't let him give in. And she even goes on to say, like, even if they did successfully tear him apart, that he still wouldn't quit, because there's a part of him that just knows, like, if he did quit, like if he did lie down in defeat, he would never get up again. And when Jackie sees that part of him, not only does she recognize it from how she's come to know him recently, but also she identifies with it in a way, because she can also see glimmers of herself within that ideal. And she also believes that this is a similar case with the Avengers, that they look at him and see their self as well, but instead they're seeing the part that they don't like. But then all of a sudden, like in the middle of this calamity, an invisible force field then forms around Joe, and all the yelling and the blasting and the hammering, they eventually simmer down as the doors open behind Jennifer and Jackie, and it's the Fantastic Four. And I gotta say, I just love the way that this is being delivered by Al Ewing and Joe Bennett, because the idea of superheroes working together as a team, and that team functioning as a family regardless of whatever they faced, that started with the Fantastic Four. And ever since the early 60s, they've led by example of what heroes as an individual or as a team should be, even in the darkest hour. And even with saying that, I do want to put out there that they're not perfect, because these guys have had some unperfect moments, which we've talked about on this channel, and I'm not going to go too deep into them here so we don't digress too far from the topic, because I'm also sure that somebody's in the comments just ready to air out a lot of those moments. Like, I can see it now, someone in the comments gonna be like, I am him, I am digression. And after that, they just type a paragraph, starting with Sue Storm, and after that, probably Reed. But that's fine with me, guys, go for it, I'm here for all that. But also, I like how this is done here, because when Jackie sees the Fantastic Four, she admits that she'd never seen them in person. And with her truly meeting them here for the first time, she describes how Reed's body makes these alien noises whenever he stretches, and how Johnny's face was unrecognizable, like it was just hidden in the flames. But with the way that they come out here and with the way that they respond to the Hulk, it's almost like that mirror effect had gotten to them too, but in their case, they reached out to him with compassion. And Jackie even expresses like even out of the four of them, Ben appeared to be the most human, with the way that he reached out his hand to the Hulk, asking him like, did they hurt you, pal? Which then caused this sad expression on the Hulk's face, but still he said nothing, and he didn't take Ben's hand, but then he just quietly walked off with Ben and the rest of the team as they made their way through the building and eventually to the Forever Gate. And so now with the Forever Gate, it was initially built by Reed's daughter, Valeria Richards, who had constructed it using technology from the Kree Omniwave projector and the Griever at the end of all things, as well as the Krakoan gateways. And when she figured out how to power it by flying it through the heart of the Zero Force, it then reconfigured to channel its own energy, becoming a dimensional doorway to every point in space and time. And when they get here, Reed, he's trying to explain everything to them about how it works and how it's potentially gonna help, but as he explains it, he struggles to put it in layman's terms. And when this happens, Ben just shakes his head and he's like, look, it's simple. The gate is gonna scan the Hulk in every cell in his body to where then it's gonna use what it found to find where he needs to go. And with doing this, it might not land him like directly in front of the leader, like right at his doorstep, but it'll at least land him in the leader's backyard. So where in that case, it may be a better scenario, because that way he'll have a drop on him, giving Joe the element of surprise. But with Ben saying this and breaking it down and just making it make sense, Joe was still quiet, and all you can really hear in that room was just the machine's hum. But Jackie then goes on to explain with him staring into the gate and the gate staring back, with it analyzing the data and searching through possibilities. And with this happening, images started to appear within the gate, flowing through the crackling of red plasma. And within one of these images, Jackie saw a version, and almost like a fairy tale version, of a happy Bruce with his loving wife, a gruff ex-military man, and a carefree teenager. And when this happens, like, she sees Joe looking at the possibility of what things could have been had the events in his life gone slightly different. And really, like, with seeing this, I need Al Ewing and Joe Bennett to go ahead and just get on the Immortal Hulk what if story, where Bruce Banner starts the Fantastic Four, because technically it's pretty much canon now. Because with the Forever Gate pulling this up as it's analyzing the Hulk, that means that somewhere out there in some alternate timeline, this reality actually exists. And I'm just curious of how it went. But after a moment of Joe just staring through this gate and the room being in silence, but then suddenly from the gate there was this terrifying yawn that sounded like it was straight from hell. And immediately they knew this was something else, it was something like fear. And it was here where Ben reached out to Joe and he let him know that the Fantastic Four, that they'll back him up when they could, but the gate as it is in this moment, it's just for him. And with seeing this, Jackie, she acknowledges like this is like the defining moment, with the red plasma boiling in front of them, with Bruce waiting on the other side, as well as the leader. And with Jackie like even coming here, like we know, it's been much about her chasing the story, or at least that's how it began back in Arizona. But with where it's taken her since then till now, with it destroying her life and then becoming it, it had then just become a series of questions that she just couldn't walk away from. And it's because of that, when Joe goes through the gate, Jackie just leaps in with them, making a split-second decision that she very much describes almost in the same words of the fairy tale that she expressed earlier when she had mentioned the origin of the Fantastic Four, when she described them as the fairy tale of those who had broken the rules to journey into the unknown, as she stepped through seeking the answers that she just couldn't live without. And when she steps through, she initially describes the feeling like she's riding on a rocket, but also she's well aware that this isn't a fairy tale that heads above, but instead they're clearly heading below. But also with it ending here and it looking like Savage Hulk and Joe Fixit are being separated again, it now has me extra curious about the future for Joe Fixit, Savage Hulk, Jackie McGee, and Bruce Banner, and if this experience will also bring some unique connection between the four. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And from the past month, we got a few new patrons who I want to give a special shout out to. And amongst them, we have Terrence S.A., we also got Nick, J. Russell B., Marks 1684, and Knowledge C. But thanks to all of you guys for supporting the channel and sending messages, like it really means a lot. But also for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to join in, I got a link below to where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. But I also gotta say, like, just heading into the conclusion of Immortal Hulk, it really feels like at this point that anything could happen. Like, we could get a happy ending, or we can get a terrifying ending. Like, there's no telling what Al Ewing is about to hit us with, which for me personally, like, it makes the anticipation like super exciting. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, like all your thoughts, your theories. Let me know down in the comments or even over on Discord. But with that said, that'll do it for this one, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.